You bought a pan 2 years ago. Non-stick, modern, store-bought. Now the coating is scratched, the surface is flaking, and it is in the trash. You spent good money on something that did not last 2 winters. My name is Gideon Adkins. Born outside Harlan, Kentucky, in a holler my grandfather cleared by hand. In the households I grew up around, a cast-iron skillet was often the only piece of cookware a family owned. It was passed down through generations. It did not get replaced. Lodge Manufacturing has been casting iron in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, 60 miles from where I was born, since 1896. Still running. Still the same iron. Today, I am going to tell you how to season it, cook on it, clean it, and bring it back when it rusts. And I'm going to correct several things you were told that are simply not true. Cast iron cookware has been in American homes since the 1700s. By the mid to late 1800s, manufacturers like Griswold in Pennsylvania, Wagner in Ohio, and Lodge in Tennessee were producing it at scale. Griswold and Wagner are gone. Lodge is still there, still in South Pittsburgh, Tennessee, still casting iron the same way. In Appalachian households, a cast iron skillet was not a kitchen appliance. It was closer to furniture, something that stayed, something that passed from one set of hands to the next without being replaced. Some families owned one pan for 40 or 50 years without question. That was not poverty. That was a tool that simply did not wear out. Cast iron was the standard for hearth cooking and wood stove cooking because it holds heat, distributes it evenly, and tolerates direct flame, live coals, and oven temperatures without complaint. A household without a modern regulated stove needed a pan that could go anywhere the heat was. Cast iron was that pan. Nothing else could match it. Ruth's skillet came from her mother, used over a wood stove, then a gas range, then passed to this house. It is in this kitchen right now. Same iron it always was. Most people think of seasoning as a coat of paint sitting on top of the metal. It is not. It is a chemical transformation that happens inside the pores of the iron itself. When you heat a thin layer of fat past its smoke point, the fat molecules cross-link into a hard, plastic-like layer through a process called polymerization. That layer does not sit on top of the iron. It bonds into it, fills the pores, creates a surface that food releases from cleanly when the pan is used and cared for correctly. That is what makes cast iron non-stick, not the iron itself. The seasoning. In Appalachian households, the fats used were lard and bacon grease. Not because anyone had studied polymerization, because those were the fats already in the kitchen, rendered from the hog at butchering time and sitting in a crock on the shelf. Modern cooking science has since found that those saturated animal fats build a more durable, even seasoning layer through ordinary use than specialty oils marketed for the purpose. The fat they had was the right fat all along. The key principle is thin coats. A thick layer of oil pools in the pan, stays gummy, never properly hardens. Many thin layers built through months of ordinary cooking produce something that outlasts the cook. Ruth's skillet never had a formal seasoning session in its life. It was seasoned the way mountain families seasoned everything. Through daily use, a little at a time, over decades. For a new pan, or one stripped back to bare iron, here is how you build the seasoning deliberately. Apply a thin layer of fat across the entire surface, inside and out. Then wipe out almost all of it. Use a cloth or paper towel and remove what you just put on until it looks like nothing is left. That is the right amount. What looks like too little is exactly right. What looks like enough is too much. Excess oil left in the pan does not polymerize evenly. It pools in the low spots, heats unevenly, and comes out tacky and gummy rather than hard. It feels like seasoning, but it is not. People who make this mistake end up with a pan that performs worse than it did before, and still cannot figure out why. Heat the pan upside down in an oven at around 450 to 500 degrees for 45 to 60 minutes. Upside down keeps any remaining oil from pooling at the bottom of the cooking surface. Let it cool slowly. Then repeat. 3 to 4 rounds builds a foundation worth cooking on. Now here is where I want to be plain about how mountain families actually did it. Ruth never ran her skillet through 4 rounds of oven seasoning. Nobody in these hollows did. They cooked bacon in the pan, fried salt pork, made cornbread with a spoonful of lard pressed into the bottom before the batter went in. Every one of those cooks laid down a thin layer of polymerized fat, the same as a formal session would, without any of the ceremony. A pan used daily for 10 years with that kind of food was already better than any pan that went through an oven cycle. The cooking was the seasoning. It always had been. Cast iron rewards patience and punishes impatience. That is the first thing to understand about cooking on it. Preheat it gradually. Set it on medium heat, and then let it come up slowly before adding anything. Cold iron thrown onto high heat creates uneven hot spots and stresses the seasoning. Let it warm at its own pace, and it distributes heat evenly, edge to edge. One of the properties that made it the workhorse of wood stove cooking, where the fire ran hotter on one side and you needed a pan that could even things out on its own. Cast iron goes from stove top to oven without complaint. Same pan, same handle, no transfer. In a mountain kitchen where one pan had to do the work of several, that was not a luxury. It was the reason you owned one pan instead of 3. Cooking fatty foods actively maintains the seasoning. Bacon, fried chicken, pork chops, cornbread made with a spoonful of lard. Every one of those meals adds a micro layer to the surface. The everyday Appalachian diet was exactly the diet that kept a cast iron pan in its best condition. The cook was maintaining the tool without thinking about the tool. Now for the acidic food question, because it deserves a plain answer. Tomatoes, wine, vinegar cooked for a long time can degrade the seasoning, and in older or thinner iron, leach small amounts of iron into the food. This is real and documented. But occasional acidic cooking on a well-seasoned pan is fine. Lodge, which makes cast iron 60 miles from this holler, says so directly. Long, slow acidic braises belong in enameled or stainless cookware. A quick pan sauce is not going to ruin anything. That is the honest line, and that is where I draw it. Clean the pan while it is still warm, not scalding hot from the burner. Warm. That is the window. Hot water and a stiff brush or a chainmail scrubber for anything stuck on. No soaking. Leaving cast iron submerged in water is one of the fastest ways to undo seasoning that took years to build. The pan goes from warm to clean to completely dry without stopping in between. Now I want to address the soap rule directly, because it is the thing most people have heard and most people have wrong. The old rule says never use soap on cast iron. That rule is outdated. It came from the days when soap was made with lye, which was caustic enough to strip the polymerized fat right off the surface. Modern dish soap is mild. A small amount used occasionally will not damage a well-seasoned pan. Lodge says so plainly in their own care guidance. I am not going to tell people something is forbidden when it simply is not. Enforcing an outdated rule causes more problems than it solves. For stuck-on food that requires more than hot water, coarse salt. A tablespoon of kosher salt with a small amount of oil or water, scrubbed with a cloth or paper towel. The salt acts as a gentle abrasive, lifts the residue, and leaves the seasoning intact. Nothing bought beyond the salt already in the kitchen. A mountain household method that cost nothing and required nothing. After washing, dry the pan completely. Hand dry it first, then set it on low heat for a minute or two to drive off any moisture the cloth missed. Then wipe a very thin film of oil across the surface while the pan is still slightly warm. That single wipe takes 10 seconds. It buys years. Rust is not a failure. It is a surface condition, and it is reversible. A pan with rust on it is not ruined. Good cast iron gets thrown away by the people who did not know it could be fixed in an afternoon. That is a waste. Good iron should never end up in a landfill over something a piece of steel wool and a patient hour of work can fix. Light surface rust. Scrub it off with steel wool or a firm brush. Dry the pan completely, then re-season using the process already described. That is the complete answer for most neglected pans. Nothing else required. For a pan badly neglected, heavy rust throughout, or old oil gone rancid and packed into a sticky gummy layer that will not scrub off. A full strip and rebuild is the right approach. Remove everything down to bare iron. A vinegar water soak, an oven self-clean cycle, or a lye bath will get you there. Then start the seasoning from scratch with several thin coats. One caution on the vinegar soak. It works well but must be timed carefully, typically under an hour. Vinegar's acidity removes rust efficiently, and then, if left too long, begins eating into the iron itself. Set a timer. Rinse thoroughly. Dry immediately. A pan properly restored performs exactly as well as it did before the rust. The iron underneath is unchanged. It was sitting there waiting. Rust is not the end of a pan. It is a pause. Before I close, I want to put the myths in one place. I have named them throughout this video, but I want to state them together because these are the 4 things people believe about cast iron that are either wrong or overstated, and they cause more abandoned pans than any actual misuse does. Never use soap on cast iron. Outdated. This rule formed when soap was made from lye, which was caustic enough to strip polymerized fat off the surface. Modern dish soap is mild. Used occasionally, it does not damage a well-seasoned pan. Lodge, which has been casting iron 60 miles from this holler since 1896, says so directly. The rule has not kept pace with what soap is today. Enforcing it leads people to avoid washing their pans correctly, which causes far more damage than dish soap ever would. A rusty pan is ruined. False. Rust is a surface condition. The iron beneath it is structurally unchanged. Scrub it, dry it, re-season it, and the pan performs as well as it always did. Good iron has been discarded over this myth for generations. That is a loss that did not need to happen. You can never cook acidic food in cast iron. Overstated. Occasional acidic cooking on a well-seasoned pan is fine, confirmed by the manufacturer. The caution applies to long, slow, acidic braises done repeatedly over time. Duration and frequency matter. Not every splash of tomato or vinegar that ever touches the surface. Seasoning is something you do once. False. Seasoning is cumulative and ongoing. It builds with every fatty meal and degrades with neglect, improper washing, or extended acidic cooking. There is no single session that finishes it. The pan is either building or declining, depending entirely on how it is used and cared for. I will not enforce a rule the evidence does not support. And I will not soften a genuine caution to seem more permissive than the facts allow. Both matter equally. That is the standard I have tried to hold through this entire video, from the first section to this one. Store cast iron in a dry, ventilated place. Not under a sink. Not in a damp cellar where moisture sits in the air overnight. Iron and moisture left together produce rust faster than most people expect, and rust that could have been prevented with a dry shelf takes an afternoon to fix. If stacking multiple pieces, put a paper towel or cloth between them. Iron stacked directly on iron traps moisture and scratches the seasoning. A thin wipe of oil before long-term storage gives the surface protection against whatever the air holds. Here is the fact that closes this. Cast iron made in the early 1900s, Griswold and Wagner, pieces that cooked through 2 world wars and the Depression, is still in use in kitchens today. Ruth's skillet came from her mother. It is in this kitchen right now. That is what correct maintenance produces, year after year, without exception. The non-stick pan you bought 2 years ago is in the landfill. The cast iron skillet Ruth inherited from her mother is in this kitchen, and it is still cooking. That is not sentiment. That is what the methods in this video produce when applied consistently over time. The soap rule is outdated. Rust is reversible. Acidic food in moderation is fine. Seasoning is never finished, only tended. Those are the 4 things worth remembering alongside everything else covered today. Every layer of fat ever cooked in Ruth's skillet is in there still, bonded into the iron, building the surface that makes it perform the way it does. Nobody called it polymerization. They called it cooking. Same thing. Tell me in the comments how old your cast iron is, where it came from, or whether you have ever restored a pan you thought was ruined. What did you find underneath?